This is my son who is missing, so today you have a double celebration. Friends, congratulations on the holiday.
Happy Victory Day!
A record-breakingly short victory parade without military equipment still took place in Moscow today. Vladimir Putin, surrounded by a small number of guests, made several bombastic statements. He once again claimed that the Russian soldiers saved Europe, and also said that the feat of the generation of victors inspires Russian occupiers participating in the so-called special military operation. He also mentioned the alleged threat from NATO, but there was, and this year for the first time at the victory parade in Russia, they brought out the wives and mothers of occupiers killed in the war against Ukraine. And even this image showed the scale of the tragedy. And right by May 9th, BBC Russian service, which keeps track of only verified dead occupiers, stated that Russia officially has already lost 352,000, and once again this is only the number that the Kremlin acknowledges. At the same time, the parade showcased new methods of launching Shahed drones against Ukraine, as well as a Russian copy of the Ukrainian Flamingo missile. But that's not all. We'll talk about everything that was left out of this parade in this episode. My name is Alexei Pecci, let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, please subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and don't forget to leave your comment under this video. This really helps promote the content on YouTube, and I would be grateful to you for that. And subscribe to my Telegram channel Peachy News, the link to it is in the description of this video. So, at the beginning of this episode, I specifically included a short video from the Immortal Regiment event in Russia, where a woman shows portraits and says that her son went missing in action in the war against Ukraine. They congratulate her on Victory Day and say, "Oh, you have 2 reasons to celebrate today." And you know, this is typical of Russia, where Vladimir Putin is finding it increasingly difficult to hide the scale of losses in the war. For example, in Chita, Russia, on May 9 for the first time, the wives and mothers of soldiers who died during the invasion of Ukraine marched as part of the parade formation on the central square. In the published footage, you can see that the women are dressed in identical jackets, and at the end of the procession, women carrying portraits of the fallen, disgraceful Russian occupiers were marching.
Sergeant Bolshakov took part in carrying out the most complex special and combat missions in the Special Military Operations Zone.
Yelena Vladimirovna Konstantinova, Mother of the Guards Senior Sergeant.
But the whole point is that this year Vladimir Putin himself began trying to recast the issue of war losses as a patriotic appeal. At the same parade, the host says that the uniform worn by the widows and mothers of the so-called heroes of the special military operation is, quote, a symbol of responsibility, loyalty, and unbreakable faith in those who are now on the front lines. Meanwhile, before the holiday, some regions in Russia received instructions from the Kremlin demanding that the word parade be replaced with ceremonial procession. And such posters really did appear in Krasnodar, Ufa, and Chelyabinsk. Supposedly, they need to be more careful with the phrase victory parade while Russian soldiers keep dying in Ukraine. And against this backdrop, the BBC Russian service publishes information that in the total number of officially confirmed dead Russian occupiers from the beginning of the full-scale invasion until the end of 2025 amounted to 352,000 people. Journalists came to this conclusion after analyzing name-by-name lists of the dead, data from the Inheritance Registry, and court statistics. For the first time ever, this estimate includes not only those whose deaths were registered through the Civil Registry Office, but also those who were declared dead or missing through the courts. Well, you understand that the deaths of a huge number of Russian occupiers are simply being covered up or not acknowledged. And for example, during the entire war, according to official data, 90,000 Russian soldiers died, but their relatives couldn't prove that they had died, so they had to go to court to prove that they had actually been dead for a long time. And as the authors of the study specify, the peak of losses occurred in 2024-2025 when the intensity of hostilities sharply increased. It was during this period that courts in Russia began to officially declare missing persons as deceased on a large scale, and within 2 years, up to 86,000 lawsuits were filed by military units and relatives. The study also states that from December 2025 to April 2026, according to Ukrainian estimates, the Russian army lost about 157,000 people killed and wounded, whereas during the same period, only 148,000 volunteers were recruited. This means that the rate of losses began to exceed the ability to replenish personnel. And here is Vladimir Putin speaking at the victory parade on Red Square, which took place without military equipment and against the backdrop of mobile internet being shut down throughout Moscow due to the threat of drone attacks. He announced some kind of progress by the Russian army in Ukraine and accused NATO countries of supporting an aggressive force. But in fact, Putin did not specify where exactly the occupiers are advancing. But there is a telling episode here. The Russian occupiers are conducting their so-called special military operation against Ukraine so successfully that another additional ring of air defense is being formed around Moscow. We're talking about strengthening positions, primarily with Pantsir anti-aircraft missile and gun systems. It is reported that since 2023, more than 100 air defense systems have already been deployed around Moscow, while Tuapse itself has been burning for weeks. Again, everything is going so perfectly according to plan for Putin that the parade on Red Square this year lasted about 45 minutes and became one of the shortest in the modern history of these events. For the first time in 19 years, the parade in Moscow was held without military equipment. Instead of missile launchers and tanks, marching columns of disgraceful occupiers walked across Red Square. The display of weapons during the parade broadcast was replaced with video footage. Viewers were shown a video featuring drones and nuclear weapons, which displayed samples of the latest Russian technology, as well as the nuclear submarines Arkhangelsk and Prince Vladimir. And here is the peak of Vladimir Putin's paranoia. For the first time in a long while, even State Duma deputies and members of the Russian government were not allowed onto the stands of the victory parade on Red Square. Vladimir Putin was accompanied only by members of the Security Council, his closest circle of officials, including the heads of law enforcement agencies, the presidential administration, and the leaders of the chambers of parliament. These are Valentina Matvienko and Vyacheslav Volodin. The rest of the officials were simply denied access. And traditionally, Vladimir Putin was accompanied by the First Lady of the Russian Federation, Alexander Lukashenko. In addition, for the first time, a unit of North Korean servicemen marched in the parade, and the event concluded with a flyover of Russian Su-25 attack aircraft, which are part of the Russian aerospace forces, over Red Square. But the footage of the occupiers launching drones against Ukraine turned out to be much more interesting. The Russian Federation showed how they launched Shahed drones against Ukraine directly from vehicles. And at the parade, they also showed a scaled-down copy of the Ukrainian FP-5 Flamingo missile, which was called Geran-5 in Russia, and that's interesting. Russians loudly claimed that Ukraine was not capable of developing anything on its own, but it turned out that Russia is already trying to copy a Ukrainian development.
The Geran 2 and Geran 5 combat crews are preparing and launching unmanned aerial vehicles to strike military targets located deep behind enemy lines.
On this holiday, our personnel are carrying out a combat mission. We congratulate the veterans and all citizens of the country on Victory Day.
I'll pause here and immediately say to the Ukrainian-speaking audience of this YouTube channel that I have a new YouTube channel where every evening I post a daily summary exclusively in Ukrainian and focused on Ukrainian topics. So if you prefer to listen to the news in Ukrainian, I'll leave a link in the description of this video to the new YouTube channel Oleksii Faiki and Pitsamki. Subscribe and support the new YouTube channel. Also leave your comments, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. And if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with a donation of any amount using the links and details in this video's description or via the QR code on your screens. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.